Hi, welcome back. This is video 5 of our 8-video series on being the trauma boss, everything you need to know about healing trauma. So this is where we talk about stage 3 of the three-step model, and we're focusing on neuroplasticity. So I'm going to share my screen. So it's mental health and well-being, right? Neuroplasticity and changing your brain. So stage 3 of healing from your trauma is where you're shifting your brain to that optimistic place and rewiring those more negative pathways to the positive pathways, okay? Just remember that's what trauma does, is it creates these more negative pathways because you have been unsafe for so long, right? So these sessions are designed to be experiential in the sense that there's plenty of moments where we can stop and journal or look at the workbook. We're going to be looking at a lot of different information. So I just want to remind you to let what resonates resonate. And if you need to, revisit the presentations so that you can pick up more each time you come through. There's a lot of information, and it's yours to peruse at your leisure. The exercises, each one of the stages, part 1 and 2, we have exercises, right? So you can revisit the exercises, and throughout the presentation, we're developing a self-compassion practice. So we're talking about neuroplasticity. It's the ability of the brain to reorganize itself, right? In structure and function. And when we talk about the brain, we talk about the brain structure, you know, what parts of the brain, and then the function, what part of the brain does this structure, what does it do? Okay, so structure and function. So we talk about how the brain changes, and this is new, you know, this is new news for us as human beings. There used to be that idea that the brain becomes hardwired, right? And it's not like that, actually. You can grow new neural pathways right into, you know, right up until the end of your life. So this is exciting news. Neurogenesis is the term, and it's the continuous generation of new neurons in certain brain regions. We get new synapses that develop because we have new skills and experiences, and these create new neural pathways. These strengthened synapses get strengthened through repetition and practice, right? So you're practicing, repeating this positive style of thinking, maybe practicing and repeating, you know, shifting your negative thinking and letting go of your limiting beliefs means you replace them with affirmations and positive thinking. You know, maybe you do some meditation and visualizations to help shift those pathways. And what happens is the connections in the brain that aren't used, those negative sort of thinking pathways, actually are weakened and then eventually die off. So, great news. The brain's ability to heal itself from trauma is actually rooted in neuroplasticity, which is related to the nervous system as well. So these new, more calm experiences that we have make new neural pathways. The brain's ability to adapt and change is as a result of new experiences, okay? Super exciting. So we talk about neuroplasticity, restore, repair, and rebuild resilience in the brain. So healing your nervous system heals your brain. The key is to make small changes every day. They add up to large changes over time. And your brain has the ability to adapt and rewire itself, which is just amazing. We're talking throughout the presentation on trauma about this idea of a window of tolerance, right? The homeostasis, the balance, your body is actually wired for wellness. So that's why we talk about mental health and well-being. So when we're in our window of tolerance, right? We're problem solving, we're alert, we're engaged, right? We're emotional, but we're still accessing reason. But we can get outside of that window of tolerance, stress, right? Things don't go our way, limiting beliefs. And that can take us up into anxiety or down into depression. So when we're up in the anxious place, right, we have this emotional distress, we can't think clearly, we overreact, we're unproductive problem solving. And when we're down in the depressed, hypo-aroused place, right? Lethargic, unmotivated, numb, dissociated. So what I want to point out here is that the deep breathing and the grounding, right? And the mindfulness are up there in the anxiety. And then we've got mindfulness, physical exercise, and deep breathing down for the more depression, right? So the physical exercise helps to regulate us out of that parasympathetic response. And the meditation sort of grounding exercise help bring us down from that over anxious response. And this is one of the things that I want to sort of just have a moment in the side. We talk about physical exercise, and who hasn't been depressed and been to the doctor and had the doctor say like, oh my God, have you thought about exercise? You're like, you're a genius, right? So the beauty of the exercise, the dance, the whatever, it's actually the cross lateralization. It's the two sides of the brain talking to each other. And the physical exercise encourages that. So you can fake your body into thinking that you're doing physical exercise with cross lateralization strategies. Because remember, I want to help you heal in a gentle way, right? So if you're really depressed and exercise is a thing, I know if you're really depressed and you're not showering, chances are you're not going to go do jazzercise or aerobics. Am I right? Yeah. So stick with me. We're going to figure this out. So is neuroplasticity a new concept for you? It is for me. I've just learned about it in the last few years and I love it. Okay. So again, if you want to pause at those heart slides and journal, you go right ahead, okay? So we're talking about neuroplasticity in action, and I love this slide. It shows how the brain can become polarized with anxiety and depression. You can see there's sort of two different sides on that normal person who's got anxiety, depression, and a weakened mental and emotional state, right? So that's that polarized response I was telling you about, where your brain's like anxious shows up on one side, depressed shows up on the other side. If you're one or the other for too long, you get habituated and there's neural pathways start to solidify, right? So this is a great example of how regulating your nervous system actually shifts the way that your brain talks to itself, okay? So what they've done is they're measuring theta brain waves. And what they've done in this experiment is they put headphones on and the person listens to music. And the idea is they call it binaural, right? So it's like stimulating both sides of your eardrums with different types of music that create a concert or the sound together, right? And then after 15 minutes, the brain starts to harmonize, okay? So you're relaxed, right? You're five senses, the hearing sense is being stimulated in a really nice way. After 25 minutes, the harmonizing and balancing of your left and right hemisphere comes into play. It's just so cool. So this is where research is catching up to mysticism, right? Because if I said to you, like, just go and meditate with your headphones on with some really good music, you'd be like, whatever, she doesn't know anything. But now you know, right? Binaural beats, there's a reason for that. It's really actually to regulate your nervous system. If you're the kind of person who regulates via the sounds, right? For me, I don't always regulate so well on sounds. I like a lot of silence. So good to know. Remember I said it's a mystery, you're the mystery. Got to figure out what you like. So we're talking about neuroplasticity. We're talking about neurons that wire together, fire together, right? So over a long period of time, you keep thinking the same thoughts, you're doing the same things, and all these neurons that wire together, fire together. It's simple. And here's an example of a neuron. It's got, the front and the back, and we're electrical. So this little neuron, right, has action potentials that go down that axon there to the end. And it's a big communication system, huge communication system. So super cool. So you can shift the way that you think by shifting the neurons in your brain. In English, please, right? I don't even know if this is going to be easier. I laugh, right? Default thinking patterns develop as a result of trauma, okay? New thinking patterns can be cultivated. So again, I don't know if that's any better for you, but I'm hoping that you're following along. And like I said, just take what resonates and then build on that. So when we talk about these neural pathways, right? This is a good metaphor. The idea of the superhighway or this hiking path. Some of my clients resonate with this. So this dysregulation, right? The style of dysregulated thinking leads to a superhighway of reactive thinking, right? Remember we talked about reactive thinking back in the other session? So this reflective thinking can be less familiar, right? And at first it can seem scary to build a new way of being. Remember, because we get addicted to our thought processes and the cortisol and all of that as well, right? So it can seem scary to be regulated and in your reflective brain. It's like, oh, what do I do, right? Oh, suddenly you feel bored and it's awkward and uncomfortable, right? So we want to remember, even good change is hard, right? And this is the thing I think a lot of my clients expect, like, oh, when I make this good change, everything's going to be really easy. And it's like, check yourself, right? Think about it. Even good change is hard. It's not as hard as bad change for sure, right? But even good change can be hard. So when I was talking about the habituation thing, right? So the body becomes addicted to guilt or any other emotion the way that it would get addicted to drugs, okay? So at first you need a little bit of that emotion or drug in order to feel it. And then your body becomes desensitized and your cells require more and more of it just to feel that same way again. So trying to change your emotional patterns is like going through drug withdrawal, okay? So go easy on yourself. You're making some big changes, and even good change is hard. And this is why, right? So long-term dysregulation leads to the development of what can be thought of as personality traits, right? Like your long-term dysregulation can look like you're just an angry person. So we mistake habitual dysregulation, right, for personality or culture. For example, right? Angry or depressed, aggressive, hyper, bitchy, self-absorbed, right? These can all be trauma states that someone is in. They're not a personality, right? It's a trauma response that they're in to keep them safe in the world. So independence, remember I referenced that in another presentation, right? And this is something that you need to consider. Remember what I said about our nervous system being a social engagement nervous system, right? We need love and attachment for survival. We really do. We are that species. So independence gained from secure attachment is rooted in safety around expressing our needs for help and relying on others. Oh my God. Imagine being allowed to have needs. Independence as a survival strategy is rooted in shame for needing help and distrust on relying on others because our experiences taught us it's not safe to do so. So again, if you get these moments where your heart's just opening and you're going like, wow, I have so much compassion for my young self, please take a moment, right? Oof, it's okay. Man, that was hard. You can do this. If you need to, stop the video, shake it off, right? This is something you can do with trauma. It constricts us, right? So if you want to, you're feeling the constriction and you're like, nah, I don't want to. Go with it. Constrict. And then let it go. And then constrict. I'm tightening my whole body. And then release it, right? You can constrict it up here, and throw it down, right? Do that, right? That's a good way. Trauma stores in your body, right? And so when you can start feeling it come over you and you've been dissociated from so long from your body, it can be really good to just start to go with that constricting and then let it go, right? So fun times. Regulation strategies are my favorite. I just get so into it. So you can see how regulation strategies, when you start to move forward in your healing, dancing, learning to dance or having those dance moves can help with your self-regulation in the sense that it's cross-lateralization. You're learning something, you're distracted, you're having fun. Anyway, I like to dance as one of my more high-level regulation strategies. And when I'm having a bad day, I am super uncoordinated. So back to the presentation. So often we mistake an emotional state for a personality trait, right? I'm an angry person or right? Versus I'm overwhelmed and confused right now, which is probably more so what's going on for all of us, right? So nervous system dysregulation, it takes many forms. It's unique to you as an individual. Okay. What your friend does or what I do when we're dysregulated might be the same as you, but it might not, right? So it might not. So I just want you to take a minute to consider the idea of an emotional state, right? I get in an angry state because I'm dysregulated versus a personality trait. I am an angry person, right? And you might need to journal on that because trauma, right? When often with trauma, there's anger. Why did that happen? It didn't have to happen. Why me? What if it didn't have, like, there's anger there for us, okay? We're going to talk now about authenticity and attachment. We cannot talk about healing trauma without talking about authenticity and attachment, right? Humans need love to survive. Humans need to be authentic to actualize their potential. This is where the healing lies, right? So Brene Brown says authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. So with trauma, it often shatters our sense of self, right? And we have to embrace who we are with the trauma, which means we have to look at the way that we've been impacted by it. We can't do that in the middle, in the beginning. We just have to learn, to manage the shock to our nervous system often, particularly for bereaved parents, right? After the loss of a child. So having needs, right? What does that look like? This is a helpful slide to return to, okay? So this is a deeper look at Maslow's hierarchy. So we talked before about those, physiological safety, belonging, and esteem needs. And later in his career, Maslow said, these are actually deficiency needs. In fact, when people don't have these things, they have a deficit in their development, right? And so now we know that that's true from the ACEs research, right? And so then Maslow sort of made the distinction that, these are our growth needs. We have cognitive growth needs, aesthetic, self-actualization, and transcendence, okay? So most people who heal from addiction and really stay the path, right? They don't heal without transcendence. They find a higher power. They get in touch with the God, whether it's, a formal religion or informal religion. That transcendent piece is often a key for trauma survivors. But again, we don't get there overnight. We go through the stages. So just wanted to say that. So I like this. This can be helpful, and you may want to revisit it again and again. So trauma and our sense of self, right? Early trauma recovery involves establishing a sense of safety and building coping strategies. The idea is that your sense of self, right, has to grow larger than the trauma, but you need that safety and those coping strategies to build that sense of self. So here are some default thinking patterns that you might find helpful when we talk about trauma responses and trying to understand your trauma response. So these default thinking patterns, right, they develop as a result of the trauma. And remember, neurons that fire together wire together. So we are mistaking personality, right, for a trauma state. So there's this fight response, right? This physical aggression that people get, right? Or the flight response, the running away. There's the freeze, right? There's the flop or fawn response. And then there's the friend response, right? Where, you're aware that a relationship is maybe dangerous, right? But you know that you need to sort of bond with that person for your safety, right? So that can be something that we'll see in trauma survivors, right? And the common thing is we're mistaking dysregulated thinking for regulated thinking, right? This isn't who you are. This is what happens to you when you're not safe in your body, and that could be the result of, as we talked about, big T traumas or small T traumas, cumulative traumas that happen over time. Remember the firefighters? What? I don't understand why. Yeah, that could be someone also, maybe someone who's grown up as a minority, and they've had all these microaggressions that they've experienced, and it leads to a similar trauma response as one of those big T acute traumas. So go easy on yourself, right? So here we go again. Psychologists love charts. So I'm going to share another chart with you. So we want to recognize trauma parts by the role that they play. This is really fun, okay? So these different parts of us: attach, flight, fight, freeze, submit. The attach is kind of like the fawn, okay? So that attach can be seen as like really needy, right? That part of someone will show up as that trauma state is like really needy, desperate, right? Craving connection, and maybe sweet, innocent, right? Wanting someone to depend on. And it looks like it's a personality, but really it's a trauma response. Okay, here's another one. The flight response, right? What does that look like? Escape, distance, ambivalent, right? Can't commit, often addictive behavior, or eating is disordered, right? And again, you're thinking that that's a personality thing, but that trauma response, okay? So the fight response: angry, judgmental, mistrustful, self-destructive, controlling, maybe suicidal, right? Maybe needs control, okay? So again, not necessarily a personality. It's a trauma response, but it looks like personality. It'd be tough when you're up against these trauma responses in someone and they have become so ingrained that this person thinks that this is who they are, right? So the freeze trauma response, like fear, terrified, wary, you can't go outside, agoraphobia, panic attacks, right? Again, you start to think this is who you are. This is your trauma response, right? And that's why we regulate the nervous system. We look at the way these limiting beliefs are impacting our life, and then we try to shift. Submit, right, is usually associated with shame, depressed, ashamed, filled with self-hatred, passive, right? Maybe the good girl, maybe the caretaking over pleasing, right? Or self-sacrificing. Again, those are not personality traits. I trust you, believe me. Nobody wants to be submissive to someone else for a lifetime. That's not, it's a trauma response. It's not who someone is, right? We all have this optimistic self, right? That craves creativity and openness and connection and love and support. It's not something that is unique to one individual over another, okay? So this diagram maybe is a little bit hilarious, right? So we're talking about the impact of trauma on your sense of self. And I drew this with my computer, right? And so you can see in the sense of self, it's like all these fragments, parts of self, right? And the trauma is really big, right? And so what you want to do is you want to grow that sense of self, and you want to also integrate the different types of self. But that diagram is just cracking me up. So you want to grow your sense of self and shrink that trauma, right? Because trauma shatters our sense of self, right? And often when we go through, a childhood mirror, maybe we have the ACEs and the adverse childhood experiences or the intergenerational trauma, right? We aren't allowed to develop our sense of self because we are regulating through someone else. Our co-regulation, our survival is required that we regulate someone else. So we're not learning to be our authentic self, right? Our authentic self is regulating for other people, is doing these things, is all these other things. We don't get a sense of who we are authentically because our sense of self is rooted in survival, okay? And that's why John Bowlby says our patterns of protection in childhood become our prison in adulthood. I'll say it again. Our patterns of protection in childhood become our prison in adulthood. You cannot escape them. I promise you. I mean, until you know better, of course, right? And then you can escape them, is what I mean. You're not just going to escape them because you're like, oh my God, I don't even talk or think about my childhood. You don't, right? But you're still being owned by it in some way. Okay, so when we talk about sense of self in our trauma, right? Trauma compromises our ability to engage with others by replacing patterns of connection with patterns of protection. Ouch. I like that one. We need connection, right? But we also need protection. So finding out what's at the core of your value system is super important for trauma survivors. You need to really dive into that. What is important to you? Your core values and your sense of self play a critical role, not only in motivating your behavior, but also in giving you a true sense of meaning and purpose, right? Which is what you want. You want to be of service. You want to be valued. You want people to see you for who you are and love you for who you are. And that's not just one partner, right? That's other people, and relationships are dangerous when we come from trauma. So we got to talk about relationships. We can't talk about trauma without talking about relationships, right? I love this quote. Stop asking me to trust you while I'm still coughing up water from the last time you let me drown. Again, right? Breathe deep if you need to, take a break, get a glass of water, have a drink. This is heavy. So thanks for being here with me. We're social creatures, right? We need love to survive. It's not bad. Attachment is a therapeutic term. Like I say, John Bowlby, the father of attachment. Attachment theory is so much a huge part of how we understand our experience as humans, So we have this social engagement system, and we talk about our vagus nerve when we talk about the social engagement system, just so you know. Relational wounds impact our social engagement system, right? So these patterns of protection from childhood become our prison in adulthood. There you go. It's written down for you. Safe relationships are super important, right? Trauma happened in the relationship. The healing happens in relationship as well. We regulate ourselves. We learn to self-regulate, but we still do need to learn to find ways to trust people in relationships. So consider the relationships in your life and authenticity. Do you have people in your life that you can really be authentic with? Or do you hide yourself? Either way, it's okay. I'm not asking with any kind of judgment. I mean, I know I've got people I hide myself from. It's just part of how I engage in the relationship because I don't want to hurt over it. I'm protecting myself, right? So real talk, right? Uncomfortable truths. Sometimes when people don't want to adhere to your boundaries, they'll make you seem irrational for having them. Instead of questioning yourself, accept that some people will make you feel like a difficult person for wanting healthy things for yourself, no matter how logical your boundaries are. Your work is to determine how you wish to handle relationships with people who make healthy boundaries seem absurd. I love that quote. So real talk, right? You're going to have to be firm. You're going to have to make your mental health a priority, which you're doing by being here. You're going to have to learn to listen to your intuition, which can be hard when you're a trauma survivor, right? Because you knew it wasn't safe when it was happening, and your intuition often is off as a result. So you're going to have to recognize your inner guidance, listening to your intuition, recognizing your inner guidance, okay? So your intuition is like a bodily sensation, right? And inner guidance is like that inner ding that's like, yes, no, right? And that can also be combined with intuition. So you're going to have a good base of stage 1 grounding strategies in order to create these. Did I say grounding boundaries? I said grounding strategies to create these boundaries, to create the space in your life, right? To be more regulated, to be able to think your way through things. I wanted to show you this, just in case you've never seen something like this. A lot of my clients find it helpful, right? It's called the relationship spectrum. And maybe you wonder, right? Like, When is my relationship border into abuse? So have a look at this if you need to in your spare time, or stop right now and just freeze the screen so you can take a look at it. I'm not going to read through it. But it can be, as I said, a good thing, in an unhealthy relationship. Maybe you're not communicating very well, right? Maybe you're both being disrespectful, but it's still not abusive, right? And so this can help you to see where the lines are for you, right? And also help you to know what a healthy relationship actually looks like, right? You're openly talking, you're not yelling and shouting, right? You're being respectful. You value each other as you are, right? You're trusting, you're honest. There's an equality, right? And you're also allowing each other to enjoy personal space. Okay. Being held accountable may feel like an attack if you're not ready to acknowledge how your poor decisions impact others. So who hasn't been there with someone who's making bad choices that impact you and not willing to take responsibility, right? And they feel attacked when you try to talk to them. So remember, it is frustrating to deal with someone who is reactive to being held accountable. So don't try to hold someone accountable if they're reactive. Just know what you need. Okay? So you must consider this for yourself as well. We're all sentient beings. We're striving to be, right? And maybe at times when you feel attacked, right? Is there something you need to be accountable for? It's a good check-in. Maybe there isn't. Fair enough. Right? But maybe there is. You can take a look at it. Right? So, but mostly what I want to say to you is you got to focus on yourself, right? You can't change someone who does not see an issue with their actions, right? You have no control over changing others, only yourself. So I just want to mention, right? Dysregulation. It craves support. Okay. When you're regulated, yeah, solutions. Yeah, let's do that. But when you're dysregulated, solutions suck. Right. So just think about that when you're supporting someone else or when someone else is asking you what you need. Okay. So I like this. Some years back, my wife and I got into the habit of asking each other, do you want comfort or solutions? When the other was having a bad time. That one sentence can save us from an argument 9 out of 10 times. So I think about it with my kids, right? Are they looking for solutions or support, right? Sometimes they're just needing support and other times they're looking for solutions. And I try to help them recognize that in each other as well. So think about that for yourself, right? When do you need support? And when do you need solutions? What's happening? And there's a difference, right? And what happens when someone tries to rush you for solutions or when you're in solution mode and they're still in support mode, right? So that was part 1 of stage 3 trauma healing presentation, video number 5. And I look forward to sharing part 2 with you of your stage 3 trauma healing so you can be the boss of your trauma. See you in video 6.